Hello students, this is the 10th lecture of the module of research methodology, and this would be the last lecture for this module. And in the previous lectures we've learned about the concept of research, the various kinds of research designs, the various techniques of conduction of a research, the various ways in which the data is collected, and so on forth. This unit would primarily deal with the means of processing the data which is already collected, and in this unit basically we'll be learning how to process and analyze the data which has been collected. This unit will make you familiar with the different research methods and techniques used while processing the data in your research design, and also it would enable you to learn the various data processing techniques which goes into the study of a qualitative research design or a quantitative research design. So, in today's learning objectives, we would primarily deal with the processing of data, what is editing, the types of editing with special focus on field editing and central editing. Then we'll learn about coding, how coding is used in the research process to facilitate the process. The synthesis of data would be very useful because only when you synthesize the data would you then be able to classify it. Along with the classification of data, we'll be dealing with tabulation of data and how the analysis of data takes place, and the last dimension of this segment would do with some basic statistical concepts which has been prescribed in your curriculum and which would enable the researchers to conduct a quantitative or qualitative method. So to begin with, what is data processing? Now, before going to the term data processing itself encompasses of two words, data and processing. Now, what is data processing? Ideally, data implies the set of facts, the set of information which you collect to enable a proper research process. Now, the processing of the data is instrumental because primarily it allows the data to be schemed, to be analyzed, and to be made relevant enough to be used for the research design. Now, the collected data is usually in any research processed and analyzed to come to see of some conclusions or to verify the hypothesis which has been made. For example, if we conduct an experiment to find out the ill effects of vinegar on an eggshell, we would probably conduct the experiment and we would put the experiment into differential phases, and based on that we would come up to the hypothesis which we have chosen, whether the vinegar acts as a corrosive agent for the eggshells or not by analyzing it. So processing of the data is very important as it makes further analysis of the data easier and efficient. Now, when we talk about processing of data is usually culminated into 5 steps. So it would consist of editing, coding, classification, tabulation, and analysis. So any data which you collect should first be edited. Now, editing itself would take care of the process of scheming. Then you have coding, how the data is coded into usable structures or categories of information. The classification itself would imply the subdivisions which we make. The tabulations which we form would be the tables and charts based on which we we would finally analyze the data. So basically, when we talk about the process of editing, the editing process is basically conducted into two types. Now, when we talk about editing of the data, the edited data is usually collected, and that collected data is usually examined. So, the process of editing would entail the sieving or the correction or the process through which you find out which data is suitable or not. So the data editing process is the process by which the collected data is examined. And why is it examined? It is examined because it is crucial to remove the unnecessary and unwanted information. So it is used to detect any errors or omissions, and further these are corrected as much as possible for further use. So you keep on collecting heaps and piles of data, and if that data is not implemented into your research properly, if it is not logically checked, if it logically and systematically it's not able to synthesize into your basic research design, then the process would be futile. So for that we use the process of editing. Now editing is basically of two types: field editing and central editing. Now what do you do in a field editing? Now, have you heard of the action based research? That is, you go to your field or on site and you collect the data. Now action based research is usually not done in the laboratory, but what happens is when you do the field editing, you begin with editing terms, or you begin with editing the ineligible written form, because remember, in the field you are simply taking notes or scribbling notes, making your observations. So all of that needs to be accumulated, and all of that will be collected, will be corrected and made into a legible form. The abbreviations will be further deconstructed so that it is of use to you. Now editing is more effective when done on the same day or very next day after the interview. While we were discussing the interview process, we had discussed how interviews which are taken are usually scribbled on the notepads, and when you take interviews on your notepads, it becomes very difficult for the person to read over the data which is collected. So you need to technically put it in a font which would be understood by all, and moreover what we do is we put the abbreviations wherever necessary, we deconstruct the abbreviations, we look into the writing format so that later on when it comes into condensing and culminating the data, we can easily do that. Now editing is more effective when it is done on the same day, primarily because the short forms which you might have used in a hurry might not be understood or remembered by you as you go later on. So it's very important to do it in the very same day itself. Now the investigator must not jump to conclusions while doing field editing. Since every day you are basically compiling, correcting and manipulating the notes which you make on site, it is very essential that whatever notes you take, whatever note down you have made is used in the research. But it is not that whatever you make in a single day will be primarily dealt with in the main research, because when we were learning about the report writing techniques, we saw how something which is written in a period of 3 months, post a period of 3 months, that might not seem valid. The first draft is always the last draft. So, which is why when you make your necessary amends in your field notes, it's essential to remember that it cannot be a foolproof final version. What is required out of you is that you take the notes, you structure it into a usable format, and from then onwards, what you do, you keep it in a documented manner so that whenever you need to go back during the final stages of drafting, you can always go back to the notes which you have already created. Now, what is central editing? Editing again comprises of central editing. In central editing, it relates to the time when all data collection process has been completed. So, during the field time, you were simply collecting and correcting the notes which you were collecting on a day-to-day basis. Now, central editing itself implies that it is a summation of all the notes that you have done throughout that period. So central editing relates the time when all the data collection process has been completed. Now, here a single or common editor corrects the errors like entry in wrong place, entry in wrong unit, etc. So, basically, we have the editor who holds the highest position, then we have the associate editor, and then we have the assistant editor. Now, in the editing process, what happens is, when we ask someone to correct the notes which we have already given, it is not essential for the editor to collect all of them at the same point of time. So in central editing, basically we hire one person who will look into minor details, like if the grammaticals are in order, if the units have been properly placed, if the entry is not done in a wrong unit. So basically, you do a correction check, you see that there is no box up happening. Now, as a rule, all the wrong answers should be dropped from the final results. So, after the process of going through the editing, for example, if I give you to conduct an interview via the questionnaire process. Now, what is happening here is, during the questionnaire process, you will find that some responses are pertinent to the questions asked, whereas some responses can be considered invalid. So, the invalid answers, the invalid responses, all of them would be done away from your final process. So, that is basically the process of central editing. So, while field editing occurs on a day-to-day basis and it's the day-to-day homework which you will do, central editing is the process by which, through the culmination or the corrected work which are culminated together, it would finally be placed in one proper final draft. So, only when you do your field editing regularly would you ideally go for a central editing, because if you do it in that systematic manner, not only it will save your time and energy, but you will not miss out on the addition or subtraction of relevant data which might be highly essential for your research design. Now, what are the points you should consider before editing? Now, the editors must be familiar with the interviewer's mindsets, the objectives, and everything related to the study. So, it is very essential that the editor who goes to correct or to scheme the data which is collected from the interview should know the kind of stimulus he should provide in order to get the desired response. In order to do so, the editor must be familiar with the interviewer's mindset. He should know how and when to place his questions. The objectives of conducting the questions should be very firm and precise. It should not be lengthy. It should not be out of context. It can be structured or unstructured. However, it should be competent enough to deal with resistance and to get the desired data and all that which goes into doing a successful study. Now, different colors should be used when editors make entry in the data collected. Now, if you are basically, when we give a report, we usually follow nowadays the MLA format where we give double spacing and we use black color and we use Times New Roman font and all. Now, if I were the editor, I should use a different color so you know basically where you are making the changes. So using a different color would not only enable you to understand where the editor has made changes, but it would also prominently make you focus on where you went wrong. So if there are changes that needs to be made in the field study, or if there are changes that needs to be made by which you can further develop a good research, it can be easily done. Now, they should initially answer all answers or changes they make to the data. So, whatever I have corrected, I need to put my initials there. So, you know who has done the corrections. Like I said, the editors will go through, before it goes to the main editor, it goes through the associate and the assistant. So, you need to put the initials there so that the researcher as well as the other person who would go through it to give you a critical opinion would be aware of who has done the changes, whether those changes are necessary or whether the changes can be kept there on it. So basically, to refute the changes, you need to color code it and put your initials. The editor's name and date of editing should be placed on the data sheet. The name is of course for the identification purpose of who has done it, but date of editing is important because when you conduct a research is not a one-day process. It takes months to complete, and in those months, if there are changes, you can always get back to the person who has suggested the changes and see whether the changes which have been asked from that particular editor stands the test of time. So you can easily make the manipulations, you can easily make the corrections when the day, date and color coding is done properly by the editor. Now, what is the process of coding? Now, in coding, a particular number or symbol is assigned to the answers in order to put the responses in some definite categories or classes. Now, coding is nothing but coding is the process by which you introduce certain letters or numbers and you assign those letters and numbers as concepts to denote a particular category. For example, air, water, land, sand, all of these can be coded as the elements of the atmosphere. Or for example, if you are trying to skim through a data where your data is provided of people who use shampoos daily and who don't use shampoos daily. So if you get a research sample survey questionnaire where you have analyzed that 50% of the people use shampoos and 50% of people or 60% of persons don't use shampoos regularly, what will you do? You will classify it into say L, which will denote people using shampoos regularly and X of people who do not use shampoos regularly. So by that coding, what is happening? You are assigning the letter, and henceforth you don't keep on writing in your report that people who use shampoos. No, you will write in a study conducted between L and X. That would itself imply of the data you are trying to pass through. So it is easy to put the responses in some definite categories, and for that we need to do coding. The classes of responses determined by the researcher should be appropriate and suitable for the study. So you simply cannot randomly put some classes. Now, if you are using a coding letter L for a shampoo because of the function that it cleans dirt, you cannot use the same thing for say dishwasher. It also cleans dirt, but the categories are different due to the work the shampoo and the dishwasher would do. You wouldn't necessarily put a dishwashing soap in your hair, right? So coding implies that when a researcher is doing a kind of coding, he should keep in mind that whatever coding he is using, they should be appropriate and suitable to the study. Now, why is coding essential? Coding is essential because it enables an efficient and effective mechanism as the responses are categorized into meaningful classes. So, not only it saves your time, but it is easy to pick up from the structure as you go through your large sample study. And what happens because of that? You are not only categorizing it, but you are also making sure that these categories would further enable you to work efficiently. Whenever you need the data because of coding, because of the segregation which the coding does in an effective manner based on the same responses, the work takes a faster speed. Now coding can be done manually or through the computer. So it can be done manually. You can just manually ascertain the numbers, or you can ascertain the categories or the symbols, or computer is always there. There are also languages which people are taught like C language, Java and all, which enables you to do computerized coding. Now, what is an open coding? Now, assign a code word or phrase that accurately describes the meaning of the text segment. So, if I have to code certain samples which I know are meant for cleaning the dishes, I will directly code it as the dishwashers. So open coding implies that you are using the word. So when I use the word dishwasher, under it the categories like prill, wheel and okay and whatnot. All the dishwashing detergents that you use would fall under one category. Now line by line coding is done first in theoretical research. You will directly not start clubbing it into categories. You need to thoroughly understand the theoretical implications of each of the words you are putting into coding, and only then would you go for the coding process. Then more general coding involves larger segments of text, and it is etiquette for practical research. So dishwasher is just a small concept, but if you do an action-based research where you have gone into a community, now you are provided with all kinds of stimuluses. You provide with stimuluses and you get the response. So if today in a cultural group you are sent and then you introduce the stimulus of capsaicin, so you will know that it would result in a certain type of disruption in the society. Now this disruption doesn't necessarily mean the malaise that would occur by the introduction of the same, but this would mean the categories in which you are denoting your categories. So for example, if you are denoting that in this particular society 50% of the people are from the scheduled caste, then 30% belong to the scheduled tribe, 10% belong to the general category, and 20% belong to the OBC or other backward classes. What you're doing is you simply involving the larger segments of the society, and then you are coding them based on the common characteristics this particular groups share. Now, axial coding. So, the process of looking for categories that cut across all data. So, it goes in an axis. It will just pass vertically through or horizontally through. After this type of coding, you have identified your themes. That is, in what nature you are going to present the study, or what are the undertones of your research would be dealt with in the themes. So one cannot classify something as a theme until it cuts across the majority of the data. So until and unless you cut across the majority of the data, for example, in the society where you are forecasting that there is a theme of untouchability, in that coded group of the scheduled caste and the general category, by your observation you need to collect the data that there is indeed a racial discrimination and disparity which is existing. So based on that, it is going axially, that is, it is cutting through the data of scheduled caste and tribes, it's cutting through the data of the general caste as well. So after that you can do the axial coding, and it is only done when you go through the majority of the data and then you make your theme of untouchability prominent. Then we have the concept of clustering. Now after open coding an entire text, make a list of all the code words. So the code words are essential because essentially the code words will be another point of reference from where you have already studied your data and you have condensed it into useful bits and pieces of information. So cluster together similar codes and look for redundant codes. So the similar codes will be placed in one category, and the codes which do not share the same values would go into the redundant codes. The main objective of clustering is to reduce the long list of codes to a smaller and a more manageable number. So when you use clustering, you usually use it in a smaller and more manageable number. The large amount of data finally gets condensed into relevant materials from where you can pick up and build on for your future use. Now, organizing methods in coding. Now, how will you technically organize a code? Take the new list of codes and go back to the data. So now you have already collected your data, you have made codes, you have revised the codes, and you have made a newer list of codes. Now you need to reduce this list to codes to get 5 to 7 themes or descriptions. So in a particular data, after coding it, again you further subdivide the codes until you get 5 to 7 prominent themes after going through an axial coding system. Now themes are nothing but similar codes aggregated together to form a major part of your database. So if you are doing a research study on the scheduled caste of India, then what is happening is you will see the undertones of untouchability, you will see the instances where untouchability, the instances of deprivation of basic human rights occur, and so on. So basically you are coding, you are making new codes, and from this new codes you are again generating 5 to 7 themes of casteism, and based on that all of this would culminate into your major data. Now identify the 5 to 7 themes by constantly comparing the data. So constant comparison is necessary if you are to code a data, and again keep on revising the codes till you get the justified coding. Now, what is the constant comparative theory? A process by which the data gradually evolves into a core of an emerging theory. So you conduct an ethnographic study where you see that people are not allowed to sit in certain gatherings, certain sections of the society are not allowed to mingle with one another, certain sections of the society believe in one God, and certain sections of the society are forbidden from believing in that God. In certain parts of the society, people are getting richer and richer while the poor class remains to be poor. Then again you see that there is undue benefits which are given to certain kinds of people in the society, whereas for others they are not even given basic rights of education, basic rights to housing, basic rights of sanitation, and so on. So now you form the theoretical framework is what it is, the discrimination which happens. And what is the larger code? The larger code here would be that of casteism, then the racial discrimination, violation of human rights, then the next code could be creation of reservation system, then social services network who will monitor the creation of the system, and so on. So 5 to 7 themes are created based on the undercurrents of your research data. Then what is happening is major modifications are lessened as comparisons of the next incidence of a category to its properties are carried out. So now in the society, if you are seeing that, okay, someone is allowed to attend the school, whereas some section of the people are not allowed to attend the school. Now based on the previously done coding and based on the undercurrents which you have already set, you will know that okay, this amount of people belongs to the underprivileged class, as a result of which probably this amount of people are not allowed to mingle in the normal spaces. So what is happening? You are gathering the data, you're studying the data, subdividing it into various clauses, you find out the identical themes, and then you keep on comparing the incidents which occurs in your data, and then this process is called constant comparative theory. And once you are constantly comparing it, major modifications are carried out and a reliable chunk of the data is finally received. Now what are themes? All this while we were talking about themes. Now what exactly are the themes? Themes are simple categories by which a data is condensed. So what do themes do? Themes reflect the purpose of the research. Now they should be exhaustive in nature. You must place all data in a category. So themes, if I am taking a theme of casteism, it should encompass everything that goes into the makings of the ill effects of the caste system. Now they should be sensitizing. They should be sensitive to what is in the data. So in casteism itself, you will see that there is a leadership which is allowing the ill effects of the society to happen, and there is also a charismatic leadership which is carried out by the, say, underprivileged caste who are inspiring people to talk about the discrimination. So you need to be sensitive in what grounds you are using it. Now theme should be conceptually congruent. Congruent means it should be in tune, in line with the ideas, and the same level of abstraction should characterize all categories at the same level. So if I am characterizing something on the basis of caste, it should include everything that goes into the making of, from the making of the caste system to the discrimination process to the reservation process to the process of demolishing the caste system and so on. The entire positive, negative and critical appreciation would be included in your themes. Now, this is the visualization on how you would code in a qualitative research. So how do you code in a qualitative research? So initially read through the text data. Now you get a text, you do not know what the text is all about, but you just read through the text. Now reading through the text will enable you to make an understanding on how many pages are there in your text. So if the text is about, say, 5 pages, so you read the text, you understand it, you don't need to proclaim it to the world, else the proclamation will happen later on. So you just read and you count how many pages are there in the text which you have read. Now divide the text into segments of information. Now, how will you divide a text into segments of information? So, for example, if you are looking into a text which is speaking about the process of trauma in war veterans, now how will you divide the text? So, the first half of the text is saying, now there will be many segments of the text. So probably the first segment of your text will say about how the trauma was caused. First segment. Remember, then you should make another segment. Now you have understood that it is saying about how the trauma was caused. Then what were the effects of the trauma? Second clause. Third clause, how did the trauma affect the soldiers? Third clause, how did the families react to the trauma? Fourth clause, how did the doctor and patient relationship develop in the course of the trauma? Fifth clause, how did the patient adjust himself to prosthetics? Sixth clause. Seventh clause could be, how did the patient get back into civilization? Is he able to adjust into the civilization? So 7 clauses has already been segmented. Now label of information with code. For example, let us label the cause of trauma as A. Then post the cause of trauma, and remember all of these should go in a logical order. So the causes of trauma will be 1. A. B will be effects of trauma. C will be the relation of the patient and the doctor. D will be the effect of the trauma on the families. E will be the use of prosthetics, and F will be your return to civilization by the victim. Now, after this, you make 30 to 40 codes. Now, how will you make? Label the segment of information with codes. Now, how is trauma caused? Trauma can be at a personal level. Trauma can be from the physical level, where the body has been charred, the body has been mutilated. Trauma can be at the internal level, that the person is not able to forget the experiences of the traumatic event. So like that, you make 30 to 40 codes. So that this could be the part of your coding A. Coding B, effects of trauma. The person has lost all sense of reality. He keeps on staring in the wall. He keeps on making sudden judgments. Then he keeps on crying all the time. Then probably he has no sense of time. He feels like he's still in the war front. So that could be the trauma set of B. Then what comes? Your relationship with the doctor and patient. The patient hates the doctor, thinking that the doctor is there to further mutilate him because of the instruments he uses, or the patient trusts no one other than the doctor. So like that, 30-40 codes are made of each of the segments. Then reduce overlap and redundancy of code. Now when you are talking about trauma, the effect it has and everything, now this is post-war trauma. So we need to do away with a lot of details on what trauma is and concentrate only on post-traumatic stress disorder. So you are doing what? You are skimming off, sieving, taking away unnecessary details and putting what is necessary, prioritizing what you exactly need to place, and from there you are carrying on with your research. Then the codes now are reduced to 20. Now, collapse codes into themes. So, codes will get reduced into 5 to 7 themes. Now, the effect of the war, the trauma will get collaborated into the theme of post-traumatic disorder. So, effect of the prosthetics would be in the subcategory of post-humanist tendencies. Then you have themes of the empathy, or you can have the themes of embodiment, the man-machine relationship, how a foot, if it is amputated, how would the prosthetic enable the foot to perform the function which the physical organic foot was performing all this while. So you get reduced into themes of post-traumatic stress disorder, you get themes into post-humanism where you study the man-machine languages, you study the caregiver's role, specifically the women who are left to carry forward the treatment procedures of their husband once they are discharged from the medical facilities. So you see the gender roles, the gender stereotypings, like that you identify 5 to 7 themes, and that is how you code in a qualitative research. Now this is an illustration of a coding process. Now coding a page from a sample interview transcript, right? So now we will start coding here. The process of reconstructing curriculum in a rural high school setting. So the codes here will be placed and the themes will be placed over there. So JJ and LU, you can make out from this, are basically the two characters who are involved. So you have already started coding JJ and LU. Now JJ. One thing, Lucy, that I have heard talked about was the fact that schools reflect the strength of communities. What do you perceive as strengths of Greenfield as a community, and how do you relate it to schools? So in this very paragraph, you are getting an idea of the theme. Now what's the theme? It is about the process of curriculum. Till now you are not aware of the process of revamping curriculum. Nothing has been taught. Here we are only talking about how a certain school is considered to be a good community given to the strengths which the community exhibits. Now, here we are just learning about the close-knit community. How? Well, I think Greenfield is a fairly close-knit community. So, this is your first coding. I think people are interested in what goes on, and because of that, they have a sense of ownership in the schools. We like to keep track of what our kids are doing and feel a connection to them because of that. The downside of that perhaps is that kids can feel that we are looking too close. But most of the time, that is the nurturing environment that we do provide an atmosphere of care and concern. To back up, you said that the health of the community. So you have already identified the potential theme of community. Now you are getting the idea that a good sense of community comes from the shared values which you share. So to back up, you said that the health of the community, it's another coding, itself is reflected in the schools. A lot of time communities look at schools and say that they are not doing this or they aren't doing that or we are missing something in our schools. I think perhaps we look at the school and see this is probably a conservative community overall. So we are seeing here that the values of the community is being checked. Now what you see over here is that the community values, what goes into building a good, potentially strong community is already being identified. So there's a bit of an idealization, and I think perhaps in terms of what is called a basic education. So you see, they are using a quote. You know, you learn the basics, the reading, the writing, and the arithmetic. So you know any change is threatening. So they are using quotes to substantiate your idea towards an ideal community. Now, look here. You have already made the quote changes threatening. So this will be one of your quotes. Now, how are you building up on changes threatening? You're seeing that theme over here. So, you know any changes threatening. And I think that goes for the community as well. So, what we see reflected at the school, sometimes that can get in the way of trying to do different things. I think again, idealization would be essential for the older members of the community, some of the maturity that they are experiencing. So they are building on the leadership thing. So there is a little bit of too much of that mental attitude. They're talking about mental attitude. So again, you start building on your potential theme, which is of leadership. So there's a little bit too much of that mental attitude, but for the most of the part, I think that there is a sense of we are all together in this and the concerns for the kids. Now, stressing more on the theme of leadership, JJ said, in terms of looking at leadership strengths in the community, where does Greenfield set in a continuum there with planning processes, understanding the need of the plan, forward-thinking, visionary people. We've talked about it a little even before. So this is building up. It's going into an axial coding system where now it is not simply concentrated on structuring it paragraph wise, right? It's not getting openly coded, but it has gone to an exist. So now the last coding which you see is visionary skills of talented people. I think that there are people that have wonderful visionary skills. I would say that the community as a whole would not be. So here you see the ideas returns to the description of the community again. Right. So I think there are people who are driving the process, but the rest of the community may be lagging behind a little bit. I think we have some incredibly talented people. And I think we have some talented people who become frustrated when they try to implement what they see as their shortcomings. So it goes on and on. But basically what you're doing, first you're making short codes, then you are making an axial coding, you are generating your themes as you are going about with your axial coding, and this is how the coding process is complemented. So basically you are segmenting the knowledge data which you receive in a text, and that segmented data now when you, as a researcher, you do not have the time to read blah blah what is going on here. So you see that okay, this is the part of the research which is talking about community, which is talking about potential leadership, charismatic leadership. This is providing ideas of change and visionary people who need to create the change. So all of these along with the inherent themes would lead into a processing of your data, and which can be further used for your final use. Now, we've talked about processing of data. Now, what do we need to talk about is how will you synthesize the data which you have already collected. Now, synthesis of data. Once researchers have a sense of what data mean and have identified categories and themes, it is time to start some hypotheses or propositions from the study. This I have understood is all about community and the community spirit. Now I will identify the hypothesis that in order to build a good curriculum in rural schools, I need to have a high community value standard. So that would be my proposition. So the data is collected. I have identified it, clubbed it into various categories. I have identified the themes. Now I will start offering the hypothesis that only if people have a good skilled community, a driven community, only then the curriculum standards can be increased in a rural school. Now this may describe the relationship among the categories that has been identified. So you are seeing that in order to have a good education system, you need to firstly have skilled personnel. Not only having skilled personnel would suffice, but you need to have a set of people who will do what? They will try to come together as a good community under a charismatic leadership and with a vision in mind. Only then would they be able to improvise the education standard of the rural schools at large. So they may also show how the data fit with the proposed research study at the beginning of the problem. So this data is about curriculum construction. I am not going into communities. I am not going into what are the makings of a good community or what are the leadership qualities I need to have in order to have a good community. What I am simply doing over here is that I am making it clear at the topmost part of this process of script, where I'm making it clear that there is a change which is required in the curriculum. So reconstructing curriculum, and in order to reconstruct a curriculum, I need to identify these factors, and these factors will ultimately enable me to carry on with the research process. Now, how will you process the synthesis of data? Now, as researchers move through this process, they may discover that their initial guiding questions do not reveal what it is that the data reveals. My initial guiding question here is about reconstructing my curriculum. But in the process of field study, I have found out only about the community. I have found out about leadership and the need of skills. Then I do a comparative study to see the difference between all of them. And so what is happening is, in this process, firstly, I am not getting into my initial guiding question of what I need to actually get a good curriculum. Then the researcher must then revisit some of the techniques, look for correlation, how well the problem, research questions and methods are correlated. So in this textual segment, if I do not give you this line of curriculum, I have this entire text. Now in this text, we see there is a thing which is written that there is a little bit of an idealization, I think, perhaps in terms of what we thought basic education. Now The basic in education is just reading, writing, and arithmetic, and you need a change. Now you are seeing the connection of the community, that you need skilled people in your community. You need educated people who will be able to implement the techniques which are required for a good curriculum development. Then you need to know what are the research questions and methods which you are going to formulate in order to know how the curriculum is functioning. So you might create questionnaires to know how the process of teaching is happening in those schools. You might create interviews to know whether there is a dearth of skilled labor, there is a paucity of skilled resource persons. You need to conduct the interviews to know what is stopping from creating a good curriculum, or you need to create comparative studies where you compare a successful school and see the drawbacks where your institution is lacking on. So basically, by correlating, you are building up your research question and method in a manner which will lead you directly to your final mode of study. Now, this can also be done by using a diagram, a table, or a flow chart, and they may help the researcher to communicate the findings with the analysis they have come up. So, you will create the diagram, you will create the flow chart, you will create the necessary graphics or visuals which are required to catch the eye of the authorities so it is implemented well. Like when we had done report writing, we had said that not all authorities have the time, or not all authorities are skilled enough to assess a research report which is done via the proper research methodologies. So you need to use your graphics, you need to use your diagrams, flowcharts, and you need to represent it in an eye-catching manner so that the message is passed on. Now, what is the importance of synthesis of data? The ultimate goal of synthesizing the analysis of data is to ensure that interpretations are clearly communicated to the readers of the research. So only if you synthesize the data in a graphically, visually appealing manner will you give the readers of your research the necessary interpretation which they are looking forward to. So basically, you will not let the readers of your research paper go through the entire process, but what will you do with? You will make sure that these people pick up on the matter which is provided to them, and they will get the required information which they want. So your ultimate goal of synthesizing the data is met, and you will ensure through it that the interpretations of your data are clearly done. Now, it is therefore necessary that there is a clear connection between the data, the categories that emerge from coding process, and the interpretations that are offered. So there should be a relation. You simply cannot put random thoughts of having a international curriculum in a rural school. Your data should be in tune with the needs of the society. Your data should have the requisite amount of information which will lead the authorities to take the steps. So clearly there should be a connection between the data you have collected. Make sure that you have collected only the required details, and you have already done away by the process of skimming all the irrelevant data. The categories should not be sudden. The categories should be clearly well thought out along with the undertone of the themes which are in that, and from there you go to the coding process and you form the interpretation. then it must be clear to the reader how the researchers draw the conclusion in relation to the identity and the collective data. So what you need to do is your conclusion should be very clear. You may have a open-ended conclusion or you may have a closed-ended conclusion, but what you are trying to present through the collected data should be clearly passed on to the authorities. Now, how will you classify the data? Now, classification of data is also a crucial aspect. So, classification of data implies that the collected raw data is categorized into common groups having common features. For example, you collect the data that a 29-year-old male who has just come from the war zone is suffering from symptoms of anxiety. He is going into panic. He is unable to sleep at night. He is behaving in an awkward manner. He is probably being an introvert and so on. So these are all the raw data you have collected. Now data having common characteristics are placed in a common group. So the grouping will come because he's showing all the mental disorders. First, you will place it as a psychological case study. It needs a psychological research design. Then you place it into groups of trauma. Then you place it into groups of post-traumatic stress disorder and so on. So the entire data collected is carried on into various groups or classes which have a meaning to the researcher. So merely putting a person into post-traumatic stress disorder wouldn't suffice the cause. What if you are just having an exam anxiety? What if you are anxious about what your results will be and so on? So, or what if you are just depressed with the way your life is going on? What if you are just anxious with your performance appraisal? So not all will go into post-traumatic stress disorder. There needs to be a certain criteria under which you are putting in these clauses. So basically how you are doing it, you are classifying them. Now how is the classification happening? Classification is happening in the form of attributes or the characteristics which your products are showing, and according to class intervals or the frequency in which the occurrence is happening. So data which you get needs to be firstly scrutinized, arranged, categorically coded. Theme should be found out, then the segmentation should be done, and only then will you classify it based on your attributes or the qualities which are being projected, or on the basis of frequencies which will give you your classification based on the class intervals. Now attribution based classification. So here the data which is collected is classified on the basis of characteristics that can be descriptive like literacy, sex, honesty, marital status, or numerical weight like weight, height, income, etc. So if I ask you to do an action-based research on a particular community, the very first thing which you will fill in your questionnaire is the set of questions which will help you identify the literacy rate, how educated are the people over there, the sex, is it male dominated or female dominated, honesty, are the people being truthful to their questions which you are trying to ask, the marital status, the married people, unmarried people, or numerical thing like the weight, the height, the income, how much they are monthly earning, yearly earning, and so on. Now the descriptive features are the qualities in nature and they cannot be measured quantitatively but are kindly considered when making an analysis. So descriptive features will itself lengthen the process of research. So what we do is we take the descriptive qualities, categorize it thoroughly, and only then after the condensation is done that we emphasize it while making the analysis. Now analysis which are used for such classified data is known as statistics of attributes, and the classification is known as the classification according to the attributes. So these qualities of mental anxiety, depression, insomnia, decline in appetite, and so on, these are the statistics of attributes, and the basis on which you are culminating these attributes and differentiating one attribute from the other is known as the classification which you make according to the attributes. Now, what is interval based classification? So, the numerical feature of a data can be measured quantitatively and analyzed with the help of some statistical units like the data relating to income, production, age, and weight under this category. So I asked you to do a survey research to find out the number of educated people in the uh, small community of, say, Kamrup district of Assam. Now, what will you do is you go to that district, you see how many people fall in the age group of 0 to 10 years, how many people fall in the age group of 10 to 20 years, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50, 60 to 70, up to 90 years. Now, once this classification are done, then what do you do? Based on that, you see their age, the weight, the income which these people are having. Are the elders able to look after the youngsters? Are the youngsters going to school? Are they literate enough? Are they educated enough? Then we also see factors like, is there geriatric care available in that district? Are the elderly people look after well and not? So what you're doing, basically, you are creating data from the variables which are given to you. So based on that, you are creating a class interval data. Now in class interval data, you mainly have three problems, that is the number of classes, then how to select the class limit, and how to determine the frequency of each class. So number of class can be 5 to 10, 15 to 20. So how will you select the class? Will you go from 0 to 10, or will you go from 0 to 5, 5 to 10? And how will you determine the frequency of each class? That is the occurrence of a particular attribute in each of the class will be measured. Now, the next we come to is the tabulation of data. The word tabulation itself implies that you are having tables. Now, the mass of data collected has to be arranged in some kind of a concise and logical order. Now, tabulation summarizes the raw data and displays data in the form of statistical tables. So in tabulation of data, what you are basically doing is you are collecting all kinds of data and you are making categories. Now these categories are graphically, they are used or classified into the various categories under which you have placed them and you plan to use them. So tabulation summarizes the raw data and displays the data in the form of statistical tables. Now, tabulation is nothing. When I say tables, it's not the table which you see at your study place or workplace. Tables here implies simply the rows and columns by which you denote the segregation of categories. Now, why do you tabulate a data? Now, tabulation of data will ensure that you conserve space and minimize explanation and descriptive statements. For example, you are conducting a field study on how many people are using red pens, how many people are using blue pens, how many people are using green pens in a given um, study. Now, out of this, you will find that the students are using the blue pens for normal purpose of writing. The students are using black pens for formal purpose of writing. The teachers are using the red pens to correct whatever has been written by the students, and the authorities or the government officials are using the green pens. So all of these, if you graphically represented it in the form of rows and columns, what will happen is you don't need to go and tell people that Mr. A is a government employee, so he is using green pens, or Miss N is a teacher, so she is using a red pen. You don't need to do that. So what you do, you make columns. One side will have your color, that is blue, red, black and green, and in the other side you will have your subcategories of teachers and students and government officials. So based on that, you make your tables, and this will not only save your space, but it will also minimize the unnecessary explanations. Now, it facilitates process of comparison and summarization. So the moment you see the chart, you will compare who is the teacher here, who is the student there. Then you will summarize that Miss N is a teacher, so she is using a red pen. You're summarizing that government officials are using green pen while the students are using red or black pen based on the formality of the usage. Now what is happening is, you are seeing that the detection of errors has been already made through and omissions. If you want to just note one color, either you will go for just a single bar, single table, or you will go for a double table. So in this way, you establish the various statistical computations. Now, what are the basic principles of tabulation? The table should be clear, concise, and educatively titled. So when you make your tables, the first thing is you need to make sure that you have put the title of your table topmost, and even at the end of your figuring, there will be a clear indication of what your figures are indicating. Now, why is it essential? Because the visual graph or the table which you are providing will bear all your data in a condensed manner. So for that, you need to be clear and concise and educatively have the labels. Now, every table should be distinctly numbered for easy reference. So which is why below the table you need to write table 1 or figure 1, figure 2, figure 3 and what it is denoting. Then you have column heads and row headings of the table should be clear and brief. So you will have vertical columns and horizontal columns, or you may have vertical and horizontal rows. So you need to see the technicality so that there is no confusion of which is the heading, which is the row heading, and you can use it clearly. Then the units of measurement should be specified at appropriate places. So units of measurement can be anything. The color could be a unit of measurement, the quantity, the weight, the usage, the timings, everything should be specifically maintained. Then explanatory footnotes concerning the table should be placed at appropriate places. Footnotes are very important primarily because you simply can't make tables out of your own whims and fancies. You need to substantiate, you need to justify why you're making the table, and your footnotes will aid you in that process. Then the source of information should be clearly indicated. If you are not identifying the source from where you are making your tables, then of course people might charge you for plagiarism, which is an amounting to an academic theft and so on. So it's very important that the information from where you are collecting should be clearly placed in your tables. Now, again, you should see that the columns and rows should be separated with dark lines. So, if they are separated with single lines, then you will not know which is your column and which is your row. So, in order to make the headings, in order to make the data prominent, you need to have a proper color coordination so that the demarcation is visibly seen. Then demarcation should also be made between data of one class and that of another. So if this is the pen or the usage of pen by the faculty and students are noted at one data, then a demarcation should also be made that the students use black pens on formal occasions, otherwise they are free to use blue pens. So that demarcation should be indicated properly between the data shared. Comparable data should be put side by side. So the data which will enable you to show that okay, only for normal class work the students are using blue pen, but for formal work such as filling up their names, filling the OMR sheet and all, they are using black pens. Why? Because it aids the computer to clearly get your marking. So all of these should be put side by side. The figures and percentage should be approximated before the tabulation. So you need to find out an approx that 40 to 50% teachers prefer using red pens, 50 to 60% will go for the usage of green pens, and only 10% will go for the usage of blue or black pens. So basically you are approximating it on a percentage of 100. Then the alignment of the figures, the symbols, etc. should be properly aligned and adequately spaced to enhance the readability of the same. So alignment is very popular. You cannot give a zigzag table and expect your the reviewers to understand what you are implying. Tables cannot be inverted. Tables should be aligned properly so that the indicators are well understood. Abbreviation should be clearly avoided. What is RP? What is BP? BP might be blood pressure. How am I supposed to know it's a blue pen? So do not use abbreviations. So basically these are the steps while you need to remember while making your tabulation. That is, it should be clear, concise, it should have a good numbering, columns and rows should be properly given, color spacing should be done, headlines and columns should be clearly demarcated, then percentage should be clearly shown, then the difference between data should be highlighted, then the symbols and the figures you use should be clearly marked, and lastly you need to avoid the abbreviations. Now this is the illustration of a table. So my headings and my columns are done. So department, number of people with the habit of white tea, of drinking tea, number of people without tea habits. So these are the two categories under which I am classifying my subject of study. So my subject of study are male and female, male and female. Now town A and town B will give me the comparative analysis. So in the first half, if I am considering 100 to be the 10th percentile on the basis of which I have started my study. So in town A, 40% of the males drink tea, while 5% of the females have the habit of drinking tea. Then in town B, 25% of males have the habit of drinking tea, while 15% of females have the habit of drinking tea. That accounts to 40% of my total data. Because 40 plus 5 is 45, and then from here, apart from removing the errors, I get a total of average of 40. Then for people without the habit of drinking tea, if males come under 20% and female for 35%, which is 55%, then I get females who would again give me a total of 30 by 30 in town B, which would culminate to 60. Now 40 plus 60 will give me the 10 percentile of 100, and this is how I would tabulate my data. So this particular data, as you can see, clearly identifies the categories, clearly demarcates the sections between male and female, clearly does the comparison, town A and town B. Abbreviations are nowhere used, and what is happening here is I'm doing it on a total 10 percentile basis. Next we come to the analysis of data. How will I analyze my data? Now, analysis of data includes method of putting together the facts and figures to solve a research problem. So, see, I've put the facts and figures, and if the research problem is on the effects of caffeine, my data is ready. Now, systematic process of utilizing data to address the research question is basically the work of analyzing the data. Now, breaking down research issues through utilizing control data and factual information is basically done in analysis of data. So, in this entire category, I have broken down the information of people who drink tea and people who don't drink tea, and I have logically categorized them into the subgroups and aligned them properly so that I get my data. So basically, in this process, I'm doing nothing but analyzing my data. Now, why do I need to analyze my data? The basic reason why my data needs to be analyzed is because I need to show a relationship between the variables, tea drinkers, non-tea drinkers. Now, it shows similarities and differences amongst groups. Similarities are in town A, town B, people do drink tea. And the differences are you do have people who do not drink tea. Now, you identify error that is inherent in a sample selection. So, analysis is essential because through this process, you do away with the things which are not required. Then you test for significant findings. Now, you need to find out what data is relevant, what are the effects of tea drinking, what are the good effects, the bad effects of tea drinking. So basically, you are trying to find out facts which will have a significant impact on your total data. Then you support the research thought in making inferences. So inference is nothing but the conclusion or the deductions which you draw. So you will support the research thought while making this inferences. So this is the reason why you need analysis of data. If you do not put your data in a proper logical manner, much of it will go waste because it is unusable. Now, what is the statistical analysis of data? Now, when we talk about any research data, in order to show the relationship, we use the process of statistics. Now, why do we use statistical data? Now, statistics itself will show you, when we give you a finding, we usually rely on statistics to either complement our research or to boost up our research findings. So statistics implies meaningful quantities about a sample of objects, things, persons, events, or phenomena. So meaningful quantity, statistics itself implies that you are quantifying it, or you are subjecting the data to a measurement. It is easily measured. Now, statistics is not only used in mathematical purposes, but you are using that amount of information to also do a qualitative study. So what is happening here is you are qualifying your objects. That is, say statistically you want to find out the mass index of a particular mass. So you measure you take a stone, you drop it in water, you measure the differences in mass of the stone in water, outside of water. So you are statistically proving it in a quantified manner. Then things and persons. In humanities also we use the SPSS package or Minitab packages now to denote the events, like if there is cyclone, if there is a tsunami, if there is a hurricane. So statistically we are showing the effects which is having on the large area. So basically we take a sample, we do the probability sampling, and from there statistically we present those things. Then it is widely used in quantification of data, be it qualitative data or quantitative data. Statistics is primarily used. Now, why do we use statistics? Statistics helps to condense a vast body of data into an amount of information that the mind can more easily understand. So usually when we are doing sampling surveys and all, say for a particular population, we are doing a sample study on the effect of religion in a particular population. So it is not possible to say that Mr. Qureshi is a Muslim or Mr. Sharma is a Hindu in town A. It's not possible to give the example of 500 Mr. Qureshis, and it's not possible to give the data of 700 Mr. Sharmas of town A. So statistically you will divide the entire population into a sum total of 100, and from there you make the segmented pockets of Hindu, Muslim, Sikh and Christians, and you say that out of the complete population probably 50% it is a Hindu dominated area and the rest belongs to the other religion. So we use statistics to classify the vast body of data into an amount of information. So you are done with the tedious process of going one by one. Now statistics will simply condense it, and you can move forward from that minuscule information which it condenses. Then statistics identifies the patterns and relationship within the data that may be otherwise unnoticed. Then any form of measurement are referred as scales within statistical literature. So anything that is quantified needs to be operational, and anything that is operational can be measured with the help of scales. Now all of these will be quantified measure, and these will be represented with the help of your statistical data. Now how do we do the statistical analysis? So it is basically of two types: your descriptive statistical analysis and your inferential statistical analysis. Now in descriptive statistical analysis, again it is divided into numerical and graphical. Numerical will be your numbers and graphical will be your graphics or the visual cues, aids which you provide. Now again inferential will have univariate and multivariate, that is the variations which occur. So it can be a single or a multiple variation in your variable. So it can be univariate inferential analysis or a multivariate inferential analysis. Now, on the numerical univariate data, we have the factors of location analysis, dispersion analysis, skewness, and kurtosis. And under graphical variation, we have stem and relief, box plot, histogram, frequency polygon, and your tables. Then for multivariate data, we have convenience correlation, and in graphical representation, we use scatter plots and data plots to show the frequencies and the changes in the data. Then in univariate testing, you have your mean, the differences of mean, variance, proportion, and the ANOVA method, while in multivariate analysis, we use methods of association, correlation, chi-square, regression, cluster analysis, correspondent analysis, discriminant analysis, factor analysis, MANOVA and MANGOVA. You can use either of the names. That depends on the how lesser or larger the quantity you are statistically interpreting, and you also have a multi-level statistical analysis. Now, when we talk of statistics, these are the basic concepts which you should remember. The first thing which we use is the word population. A population implies the whole set of universe. It's the larger segment which you are analyzing. Now then you will have sample or a subset of the population. So universe is the whole set, then you will have subsets, and subsets are nothing but sample, the pockets which you have segregated for your study. Then you have parameters and unknown fixed value of population characteristics. So if I am asking you to do a sampling survey on the Islamic nature in a particular society, you will have certain parameters. So people who read the Quran, people who wear their dressing in a certain mannerisms, people who have different food habits, and so on. Based on that, you're using parameters to statistically tell the different segregation of your entire population via one Islamic sample. Then, in other words, statistics is a known calculable value of sample characteristic representation of the population. So, mu is the mean of the population or the mean of the sample. Then, we have something called measures of central tendency. Now, central tendency is the singular value which you attach, and from a given cluster, you find out the averaging. So, you have three measures by which you measure the central tendency, that is via your mean, your median, and the mode. Now, what is the mean? Mean is the average arithmetic average which you take out the arithmetic of your arithmetic sample. Then all values of distribution of responses are summed and divided by the number of valid responses. So the average of arithmetic which you find out in any sample is your mean. Now when you calculate the mean, you take care of all the responses, you distribute them, and then you use it seeing the validity of the responses. Then you have median. The median is the middle value. So out of these 5 fingers, my median will be the middle value of my rank order distribution. So exactly half of the responses are above the value of median, 2.5. This is the middle finger. So till here it's 2.5 and till here it's 2.5. Exactly the response is found in the median. Then you have the mode. Mode is the most common value in the set of responses after a question, and the responses most often are given to the question. Now, how will you calculate the mean, median, mode, and range? So, mean is the average, right? So, if there is a set of numbers, there are 7 values given to you, 2, 2, 3, 5, 5, 7, 8. Now how will you find the mean of the same? You know there are 1, 2. First you calculate what is your n. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Your n is 7. Okay. Now add up all the values to find the total. So 2 plus 2 plus 3 plus 5 plus 5 plus 7 plus 8 gives me 32. Now when you divide by n, that is the total, you get 4.57. Now 4.57 is the mean of this problem. Then you have the median or the middle value. Now you see 2, 2, 3, 5, 5, 7, 8. So put all the values in one order. You need to numerically arrange all the values, and then from there you find the middle value. Now if there are two values in the middle, then find the mean. So mean, if it is like two values are given, here the median is 5, now it will be 2.5, right? Then you have the mode. Now the mode is the most frequently asked value. Now how will you calculate your mode? Now count how many of each value appears. The mode is the value that appears the most, and you can have more than one mode. So in this, 2 occurs twice, 5 occurs twice, 3, 7 and 8 occurs just once. So 2 and 5 are your modes in this sample. Now what is the range? Range is the difference between the lowest and the highest. So you have to find out the highest value. The highest value here is 8. And then you have to find out the lowest value. The lowest value here is 2. Now when you subtract the lowest value from the highest value, 8 minus 2 is equals to 6. Then you get the range of your sample. Now what is the pros and cons of using mean and median and mode? Now mean is more sensitive than median because it makes use of all the values of the data, but it can be misrepresentative if there is an extreme value. Then you have median. It is not affected by extreme scores, so you can give a representative value to your median. Now median is less sensitive than the mean, as it does not take into account all of the values. Then you also have mode. Now mode is useful when the data are in categories such as the number of babies who are securely attached, and it's not useful for describing data when there are several modes. Now we go to measures of dispersion. Now, measures of dispersion indicates what is the difference between a group of scores, and the difference will also indicate how much spread or diversity exists between those groups. So you have your range there. That is your higher limit minus your lower limit. Now it will let you to know what is the highest point and the lowest point, and you know the disparity which exists in those group of scores. Now usually we use standard deviation. Is a very popular form of deviation, and it's normally designed as the average distance to scores away from the mean. Then next we have the types of the methods of dispersion. Now basically methods of dispersion is divided into algebraic measure and graphical measure. Now algebraic measure means has absolute measures and relative measures. Now under absolute measures you have range, the quartile deviation, the standard deviation and the mean deviation. These are the absolute measures. And under relative measures you have your coefficient range, the coefficient of variation, coefficient of quartile deviation and the coefficient of mean. The next is the statistical graphs. Now we'll not discuss all of these graphs, but we'll discuss some of these graphs. Now, the data recorded in surveys are displayed with the help of a statistical graph. Now, statistical graphs are essential because it will lead you to know how a particular graph needs to be represented. So, basically, there are 11 types of statistical graphs. So you have box plot graph, you have stem and leaf plot graph, you have a frequency polygon, you have a scatter plot, then you have a line graph, a bar graph, a histogram, then you have a picture graph, a map chart and pie chart and a line plot. Now plotting of all of these are essential because you know that only when you plotted in this data will you be able to get a proper understanding of how the data is collected. So the first is your line graph. Now the line graph is used to compare the continuous data. So if a data is going in a continuous measurement without any changes, the frequency can differ, but it is not switching into other modes, then that data can be represented using a line graph. Then the data are plotted as points. Now in order for a data to be plotted as points, you need to have the segments ready. Now this point, the points can be from a particular point to another point. So it will have a limit. So the points are joined by lines and the graph is used to compare multiple data sets by only one continuous data. So here your velocity is being shown by your line graph. Now velocity is the speed of wind at an interval. So this is your x-axis and this is your y-axis. Now in the axis title you have put your range from 0, 0 0.2, 0 0.4, 0 0.6, 0 0.8, 1, 1.2, 1.4 and 1.6. Now you have divided it into intervals of 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, 20 to 25, 25 to 30 and 30 to 35. So it again takes you to the point where multiple data is being compared now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 multiple data are being compared from one continuous line of velocity. Now these are the points. These points will be joined by this line. So at 0.5 interval, if your velocity is 0.2, you place it here. Then 5 to 10, your velocity goes to 0.2. And how do you calculate it? 0.5, if it is 5 here, 5 then so 0.28 and it goes up. Then you have 10 to 15, that is 0.34. 15 to 20 would be 0.57, 20 to 25 would be 0.89, 25 to 30 will be 1.5 and 30 to 35 will be 0.15. Then we have something called the bar diagram. Now the bar diagram will display discrete data in discontinuous columns. So it's not continuous in nature. There is a breakage and bar diagrams will exactly do that. So bar diagram will have a double bar graph and they can be used to evaluate two sets of data. So you have one bar which will give you the difference of one sample, and you will have another set of bar which will denote the difference between the other samples. So in a bar diagram, a double bar graph is used to evaluate the two data sets. Now it's visually muscular, it implies that it's very prominent in nature. Then it is easily used to evaluate two or three data sets, and it uses only discrete data. So this is your bar diagram. Now we are using, this is your x-axis and y-axis, starting point of 0 up to a measurement interval of 20. If we have to see the effect of movie watching, it's the set of data are shown here. So in 1995, movie watching was not that popular. 98, it was a little popular as it showed people coming forward to watch the movies. In 2000, there was a relatively larger impact of people going out for the movies. By 2004, the impact was the highest. So from 95 to 2000, via the usage of bar diagram and using two bar sets, you have clearly indicated the differences which has occurred between the different sets of data from a period of 95 to 2004. The next is your pie chart. Now the pie chart is a chart which will display data as a percentage of the whole. It displays the percentage of each category, but it has no exact data. So if A to G are the different mental disorders which a person is presumed to suffer, like anxiety, bipolar disorder, then carpal tunnel syndrome, then dyslexia, then then another set of diseases like encephalitis, or a set of diseases like say flu, or a set of diseases like gonadotrophin. So A to G will relate your quality of illness. Now each of these are indicated with a color. So A is denoted by blue, B by red, C by green, D by purple, E by say sea blue, then F is amber, then G is a navy blue. So 24% belongs to category A. Then this 4% will be category G, 7% will be category B, 10% will be category C, 15% will be category D, 21% will be category say F, it's the largest, and 19% is say again category E. So out of all of these, this is just data which is showing you the percentage, but it is not showing you exact data. So interpretations can be anything unless proper headings are given. So out of 24%, 21, 4, 7, 10 and 15 and 19%, in pie diagram we are showcasing the different percentiles of the samples through which we have conducted our study. Then you have something called as the histogram. Now the histogram shows the continuous data into orders and columns. So it's the same as line graph, but it is represented in a column format. So in histogram, you are measuring say the frequency. What is the frequency or the rate in which a thing is occurring? So 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50, 50 to 60, 60 to 70 is something which you place on your y-axis, and you'll have your range from 0 to 25 in your x-axis. Now between 0 to 5 in the subgroup of 0 to 10, you will denote the frequency through a column. Then again 10 to 20 subgroup, you will again denote the frequency. So if 5 is young, probably this is 3.5, it's 4. Then in 20 to 30, probably it is 3.5. 30 to 40 it goes higher, so it's somewhere around 6. Then 40 to 50 is almost on a similar level, so if it's 6 there is 7. Then 50 to 70 it goes to a higher level of 15 probably, and then in 25 scale we have the frequency which goes to 60 to 70. Now this plotting would enable you why we are using histogram, because histogram specifically will let you to deal with two categories of data: the data values, which are also the classes in which you are setting your data, and the frequency or the continuous repetition which is happening. So like you can see here, there is another histogram where special type of bar is set for the diagram. The bars are usually columns. Then this will show you the frequency or the interval in which it is occurring, the rate at which it is occurring. Then how will you analyze a histogram? The histogram is a way of summarizing data pictorially. So it's a pictorial or a picture representation. It is graphical by nature. It will graphically make you analyze and substantiate a data based on frequency and the data variables. Then histogram will show you the distribution of data. So how the distribution is mid-range, higher than the mid-range, then equal level of lower values, then again semi-higher values. Then the general format of a histogram is a vertical scale that demonstrates frequencies and a horizontal scale that represents the individual intervals, which is called as graph. So in a particular histogram, the vertical scales will denote your frequencies. It's going up, it's vertical, and this will show the horizontal scales will show you your class. Now bars are used to represent each individual interval with the height of the bar corresponding to the frequency. So this implies each bar will have a frequency. Higher the bar, higher the frequency. Lower the bar, lower the frequency. Equal the bar, then it's an equal frequency. Right? So this is how we analyze a histogram. We create a double bar and then we plot. In the lower level it will be our class, and the higher level will be your frequency. Then based on the occurrence, we plot them into the form of columns, and these columns will let us know the differences in the frequencies. Then we have something called as a scatter plot. Now the scatter plot will show the relationship between two factors. It's scattering. Have you seen the small figure here? It scatters. So it shows the relationship between two data. So if you are having a class interval of 0 to 70 and income group, so you also have the frequency as your 10,000, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 and 80,000 respectively. So age group of 0 to 10, there is no income. Age group 10 to 20, no income. 20 to 30, on the higher end of 30, you have an age group which probably gets 30,000 income. Then between 30 to 40, you have an age group which will earn between 30 to 40,000. 40 to 50 age group will earn probably 50,000 a month. The 50 years of person might have an income higher than 50,000 but lesser than 60,000, somewhere around 55,000. Then 60 years of age, you have people having 60,000 as a monthly income. Then the interval between 60 to 70 is where you have your highest, that is the range between 70 to 80. So your income is not going beyond that So this is how it is measured. Now you just have to remember which are scatters, and this is how a scatter plot looks like. Then we have a cartogram. Now, what is a cartogram? Cartogram is a colored map that gives us a graphical representation of statistical data. It is used for an immediate view of a phenomenon or a behavior. Now, when you use a cartogram, you should keep in mind the concepts that cartography is basically the study of maps. Now, when you are asked to draw a map, then what happens is you will have latitudes and longitudes and time zones and medians which needs to be plotted in the map. So because of that, we use a cartogram. Now cartogram is a colored map. Why is it colored? Because it will distinctly show you the differences in your data. Then it gives you the graphical representation of the statistical data. So this is the population of India. Now if you were to give me a graphical representation of the difference in between the different states of India, you will do a ethnographic study, and that results of the ethnographic study will be displayed via the use of a cartogram. So basically this is the map of India. Now this is the northeastern aspect. So here we're doing a population study. This is the cartogram showing population variation between the states of India. So this is the northeastern state, which is denoted by the color of sky blue. Then you have the central part of the Indian map, which are denoted by blue color, light blue and dark blue. Then you have like the teal green in certain areas, and then you have a solid green. Now what will you do here is when you collect the data, then you also have the smaller and Nicobar. So it is very sparsely populated. So in order to show the population, you use color code. Now in places of Assam, Nagaland, you can see that Assam, Nagaland and Manipur, the population estimate is between 42 lakh 6 4 crores 42 lakh 64,073 to 92 lakhs 46,013. But in 1307 to 11 crores 78. Then again, similarly over here, the population structure would fall between 20 crores and 340 lakhs and so on. And here the population is sparse. So here there will be a differential marking. Then again in Punjab and Haryana, in the northern belt up to Jammu and Kashmir, the population is somewhere between these two subclasses. Gujarat has a relatively lesser population, which goes to Tamil Nadu. And with that, we are left with mainstream India, where you have Madhya Pradesh and the other states, Bihar and West Bengal, which will have relatively similar levels of population. So this is how a cartographic study is done. And with this, we come to the end of our presentation. But I would just like you to go through what we have learned into this 10 lectures of research methodology. We began with the research concept, the research design. We went on with the hypothesis. We went on with sampling. We went on to the scaling of research, and with the scaling of research, we did our studies of understanding the various attitude sampling scales and so on. Then with that, we went on to do the thorough study on how to collect the data. Now the data collected were either primary and secondary data. We learned throughout this course on how the primary and secondary data are collected. Then we went on to study the wars, the branding, how statistics and how the other measures of data analysis aid in the different kinds of researches. With that, we went on into processing of data, and in processing of data, we learned how to code the data, tabulate a data, and how to statistically and graphically give our data. And the last stage was of report writing, where we learned how to put our findings into a compiled study or the research report. So I hope that you found it useful, and with this we come to the end of our methodology. Thank you once again.